Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we're going to start looking at the Knights versus Dragons dual deck, and in this video we're going to start looking at the first half of the deck, which is the Knights side of it. So this was actually the first dual deck that I didn't actually buy. I actually skipped this one. I can't remember my reasons why. I think I just wasn't interested in it from the sounds of things. Like I think maybe I saw the deck list back in the day when it was on the main like WotC Magic the Gathering website, and I saw it and just like, I'm not that interested in it, so I didn't buy it. I think I was kind of I don't know, also maybe recovering from the Phyrexia versus Coalition one as well, because I bought the Elspeth and Tezzeret one, the one before this, which I thought at the time was pretty good. So I think in my mind I was like, right, I'm just going to get the Planeswalker ones and like skip over these faction ones. Maybe that's why, but kind of regret it after actually looking at this, because I think it's actually a fairly decent product again. Definitely better than some of the ones we've looked at. Anyway, let's dive in and start looking at the Knights deck, which is white and green. The first two colour dual deck we've got, they've all been mono-colour up to now, or the Coalition one, which was 5 colour. So really weird that with this kind of this far into dual decks, and we've only just now had a 2-colour deck, but actually quite a lot of them going forward now are 2-colour. Anyway, let's look at the deck list. So 24 creatures, whole bunch of singletons. So we've got a lot of cards to talk about. 7 instants, 1 sorcery, 1 artifact, 3 enchantments, and 24 land, and a mana curve off to the side there. So let's just start looking at all these knights. Yeah, I think maybe that was why I was surprised as well when the product was announced, like white green for knights, because I don't normally associate green with knights. You know, I would expect this to have been like white black or white red maybe, and we'll maybe talk about that a bit later. White green I think was a bit of a weird choice, but it's all worked because we'd had a Lara block, there were a lot of knights in green, so no, we'll see if it's kind of worked out. So the foil face rare with alternate art is the Knight of the Reliquary. So 1 a green and a white for a 2/2. Has +1/+1 for every land card in your graveyard. You can tap, sacrifice a forest or plains, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Right, I have thoughts about Knight of the Reliquary. Obviously, it's a really, really good card. Actually, I have a small story around Knight of the Reliquary. When I went to Modern Masters was new, I went to a draft for that. I managed to remortgage to afford to go to a sealed event for Modern Masters, and my first pack was Knight of the Reliquary, so I first picked that, and then my second pack was Lightning Helix, and just like, right, well, we're going Naya then. So there we go. That's my whole connection to Knight of the Reliquary, and I played in those games, and it is fairly good. And it is obviously a good card. It has a really good effect, really strong ability. I would argue in this deck, though, where it's kind of a very straightforward white-green, play a bunch of knights, and just swing, this is almost like too technical a card for the deck it's in, if that makes sense. Because it doesn't really have a whole theme about like sacrificing lands, because obviously like Knight of the Reliquary is really good in a deck where you have like basically a bunch of fetch lands. That's where its power comes from, and then it, because of you're sacrificing fetch lands to tutor up other lands, it can sacrifice lands itself, and you can search up non-basics as well to and so it can get a lot of power from that. There's not really a lot of that in this deck because we have a very basic kind of mana base of mostly basic lands. A few other non-basics as we'll see, a few fetch lands actually, not obviously proper fetch lands, but kind of budget fetch lands. But it's not a huge theme. There's like one other card in the deck that lets you sacrifice a land, but it's it's one copy of a sorcery that lets you do it. So again, it's not really a big theme in the deck, and obviously you can use Knight's second ability to sacrifice forests and plains, and you thin your deck. I mean, obviously that's like kind of a good thing, but I'd say it's not living up to maybe its full potential in this deck. I wonder if you agree with me with that, and if you've got thoughts on it, definitely stick a comment down below. Because I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of experience playing with Knight of the Reliquary because at the time I was playing, it was a super expensive card, couldn't really get my hands on it, or find a way to put it into decks. So I don't have a super lot of experience playing it. I can definitely see how it is good. I'm just saying, like, maybe in this deck it's not up to its full potential, which is usually, something we usually see with a lot of kind of cards like this in these pre-constructed products. But I think it was definitely a good pick for the foil fish rare because I think it would have gotten people's attention because it was at the time when it was kind of a hot card and like people would have seen it. You know, it's got alternate art as well, so I could see people picking up the product to get a kind of a guaranteed, you know, foil Knight of the Reliquary. Maybe I suppose maybe at the time for cheaper than buying them as singles. Anyway, talked about Knight of the Reliquary a lot. But yeah, I think I think it's a good card. But I say, whether it was the right pick for this particular deck, I don't know. Anyway. Let's go on and talk about some cards that aren't as complicated as Knight of the Reliquary. Single Knight Exemplar. This is much more straightforward. 1 and double white for a 2/2 first strike gives all your other knights +1/+1 and indestructible, which, I'll be honest, the Dragon deck has no answer to. Like, if Knight Exemplar comes down, it's staying down. Obviously, it itself doesn't become indestructible, it just makes all your other knight creatures indestructible. So this has then just got a massive target on its head. But again, this is actually so difficult for the Dragon deck to deal with if you just make your whole board indestructible, because you know it's obviously got a lot of burn, which is then becomes completely useless. We've got a single Not Vine Paladin, green or white for a 2/2. Whenever it attacks, gets +1/+1 till end turn for each untapped creature you control. So sort of like a spin on Exalted, which is a mechanic I'm very fond of. And things like Knights normally have Vigilance, and you know you would think this would go well because then you could attack with a bunch of Vigilance creatures, and this would then also get its buff as well because you've got untapped creatures. Whereas there's actually not that many creatures with the Vigilance in this deck. There's a few, but not as many as I would like there to be. So this, most of the time, is kind of acting like an exalted creature where it's maybe attacking on its own and getting a load of buffs from all you having your untapped creatures. I do think Not Vine Paladin is a good card. I'm just wondering maybe if there's maybe not the right cards to like really support it as much in this deck. I think it's still fine. I think it's still a good card. Obviously, at the very least, you know, it can punch up. It can get like a pretty big boost, and it's just making that skill test decision of like whether it's better to attack with multiple creatures or attack with the one Not Vine Paladin that gets a really big boost. Single Kinsbale Cavalier, 3 and a white for a 2/2, gives all your knights double strike, which again, really hard for the Dragon deck to deal with because you've immediately doubled your damage output. Really, really nice. I do love this card. I do wish it wasn't a Kithkin because I hate the Kithkin so much. I really wish this was like, I don't know, there was essentially like a functional reprint of this, but make it like a human or a Leonin or anything like that. Anything but a Kithkin riding a goat and just T-posing for dominance. And then we're also sort of along the lines of Knight of the Reliquary, is sort of a very more technical card, Knight of the White Orchid. So double white for a 2/2 with first strike, which is absolutely fine. So when it ends the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Now, again, at the time, this was kind of a hot card because white land searching land tutors like this usually go for very high demand because it is an effect that is in white's color pie, but it's an effect they don't get often, or it comes with conditions. Like in this one, if an opponent controls more lands than you. But on the offside, it's only 2 mana for a 2/2 first strike, and it also has this ability as a non-basic planes as well. And again, that's where I think a lot of the value came from, that it could get non-basic planes. So like dual lands and other certain cards. In here, again, like Knight of Reliquary, I don't think it's like living up to its full potential because it can only get a basic planes, which is still fine, obviously. But it's still good. It's still good. It's not a bad card. It is still good. But yeah, it has the potential to be so much better. And again, like I said with Knight of the Reliquary, it feels like more of a kind of a technical card than it's a smart card in kind of a dumb deck. If that's the only way I can describe it. Again, if you got thoughts on Knight of the White Orchid, again, put a comment down below, and I'd really like to know people's thoughts on like including this and Knight of the Reliquary in here. And then anyway, moving on to the non-rare knights. So we've got a Juniper Order Ranger. This is really nice, actually. I really like this. This is more like the casual Unga Bunga vibes that I like. So 3 green and a white for a 2/4. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and a +1/+1 counter on Juniper Order Ranger. This is just super good, and obviously goes really well in decks that like to poop out a bunch of tokens. There's not much of that in here, but we are playing kind of white green weenie. We are going wide with a bunch of creatures, so there's a lot for this to do. And again, it can get really big really quickly. You can obviously pump up those other creatures. So yeah, I really like Juniper Order Ranger. Single Knight of Meadowgrain, which is a really nice knight from Lawin Block, so double white for a 2/2 first strike lifelink. This used to go for a lot of money, actually. This was like a really good like power uncommon back in the day, because it's really efficient, like at 2 mana just for a 2/2 first strike lifelink. There was definitely a lot of frantic trading in my local game store at the time, as people were trying to get play sets of Knight of Meadowgrain, and everyone used to run White Weenie and stick this in there. So yeah, really, really nice inclusion. I really like this in here. So we've got Silver Knight as well with nice new art. So double white for a 2/2 first strike protection from red. Again, huge middle finger to the Dragon deck, which is mono red. There are 2 cards in the Dragon deck that can deal with this. In terms of like removal or like against the Dragon deck, this basically is just a 2/2 unblockable. And then this is a really confusing choice, is White Knight. So 2 white for a 2/2, first strike, protection from black. There's no black cards in the Dragon deck. So so this is worse than a lot of... It's worse than Knight of Meadowgrain. It's obviously worse than Silver Knight. So that protection from black is literally doing nothing. There's literally no black cards in the Dragon deck. And it's just a weird choice. It's just a weird choice to include. I hope you agree with me on that. Because it's just, as it is, it's just a 2/2 first strike for 2. So yeah, it's definitely a weird choice to include this, I think. Then we have a whole bunch of flying knights, which is good because obviously the Dragon deck has got a whole bunch of flyers. So these basically go on a nice sort of like progressive curve here. So Leonine Sky Hunter is double white for a 2/2 flyer. Sky Hunter Patrol is 2 and double white for a 2/3 with flying and first strike. And then Plover Knights is 3 and double white for a 3/3 flying first strike. These are obviously all fine. Plover Knights, I feel, is actually the best. From what I understand, Plover Knights actually had like a bit of a run as like being really good in Pauper, because it was like for 5 mana, it was like one of the best flying creatures at the time, because it had flying and first strike, and like decent power. Like I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere, that Plover Knights was like quite a notorious card for some point. I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me on that if I'm wrong. Right, and then we've got a return of the level up creatures from Rise of the Eldrazi, and these are, I would say, the better ones. I still am not keen on level up creatures. I know some people really like them, really fond of them. I just don't think they're great. I think you just sink a lot of mana into something for something that's ultimately not worth it. You could be better off playing like cards from hand and like adding more stuff to the board rather than sinking mana into like dead levels essentially. So we got single Caravan Escort, 1 white mana for a 1/1. You can level up for 2, so it means 2, you put a level counter on it. When it has 1 to 4 level counters on it, it is just a 2/2. When you have 5 level counters on it, so again, by that point you've sunk 10 mana into it. It's just a 5/5 first strike, which is just a 5/5 first strike. That's obviously really, really good. But is it also worth sinking 10 mana over however many turns to get to it? I don't know. Knight of Cliffhaven, 1 white for a 2/2. You level up for 3 mana. At level 1 to 3, it's a 2/3 with flying, and at level 4 plus, it becomes a Serra Angel. It's a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. And again, is a Serra Angel worth sinking at that point 12 mana into it? I don't know. I don't think so. But I always welcome other people's inputs and opinions on these sort of things. And then Kabira Vindicator is probably the most interesting of the 3. So 3 and a white for a 2/4, level up for 2 and a white. So level 1 does nothing. So immediately that first level up is a dead level, which I think is a really bad design, honestly. But level 2 to 4... he becomes 3/6, and it's an anthem effect where your other creature gets +1/+1. And then at level 5, again, at this point, you've sunk 15 mana into it. I really want to make that clear. I don't think 15 mana is a great investment to this. But then becomes a 4/8 and gives all your other creatures +2/+2. So, like, I don't know. I mean, if it helps you win the game, paying 15 mana in installments might be worth it. I don't know. But like, I'm not super keen on these level up creatures. But I guess they're kind of fun and gimmicky to include, I suppose. And then some kind of less than amazing knights, I would say. So a single Zalfirian Commander, 2 and a white for a 2/2 with flanking, which is weird. It's the only flanking knight. We just had times, we had Time Spiral before this, and there was a whole bunch of knights in there with flanking that could have been included. Which I'd argue is a much better mechanic than level up. And it's got this very weak ability. I mean, to be fair, it's a very old card. But 1 and a white to give a knight +1/+1 to end turn, which is fine. We've got 2 Lionheart Maverick, one of the few 1-drop knights, 1 white mana for a 1/1 vigilance, and spend 4 and a white to give it +1/+2 to end turn, sure. And then Benish Lancer, this from Invasion, 2 and a white for a 2/2, has kicker 2 and a white. If it was kicked, it ends the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on, and it has first strike. I think I remember saying, like, when this was in a Invasion deck, years ago when I looked at those decks. I think this would have been fine being a 2/2 first strike, and then the kicker would have just given the counters. I think that would have been okay. But yeah. Anyway, it's like it's a it's a obviously really weak card by the even by the standards of the day that this product was printed in. Then we got a single Paladin of Prav, 4 and double white for 3/4. Whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life. So it's old style lifelink, where it's like a triggered ability rather than proper lifelink. And you can forecast it, which means you can spend 1 and a white, you can reveal it from your hand during your upkeep, and then you give pseudo lifelink to another creature, which is, I mean, it's fine. At least it's something to do until you wait to cast it, I suppose. We've got a single Steward of Valeron, green and white for a 2/2 with Vigilance and tap Strad green. This is actually really nice. I really like this. For some reason, I really hate on this card when it released. I didn't like see the value in it at all, and I see it now and just like, wow, it's actually pretty solid, I think. So I would have liked to have more of these for sure in the deck. Single Alaborn Cavalier. This is a reprint from Portal. 2 and double white for a 2/2. Whenever it attacks, you may tap target creature because he shoots you. It's just a knight carrying a gun, which I think is fantastic. Because all the a lot of cards in Portal featured guys carrying massive flintlock rifles, which is really cool. And it's always weird to me that we just at the time of recording we just had Thunder Junction, and like no one in that had guns. They all had like like magic guns or whatever. Just weird to me, but it is what it is. Yeah, this is okay. This is essentially a functional reprint of stuff like Seasoned Marshal. It's fine. It gets big. It gets blockers out of the way. It's fine. And then a single Wiltleaf Cavaliers. So 3 Selesnya hybrid mana for 3/4 vigilance, which is just very solid. I like it. Right, non-creature spells. So we've got a single Harm's Way, so 1 white mana, bounces 2 damage around from a creature of your choice to another creature, which I think is a really fun ability, just to bounce damage around. Single Test of Faith, 1 white, you prevent up to 3 damage that would be dealt to a creature this turn. It gets a +1/+1 counter for every damage that would be prevented, which is really solid, actually, like 3 mana, I think, to 2 mana to prevent 3 damage and then give 3 +1/+1 counters is really, really nice, I think. Reciprocate. This I've always liked Reciprocate. It's probably not very popular, but I think it's pretty cool. So 1 white mana. You exile a creature that dealt damage to you this turn. That's the only restriction. It's I mean, it's obviously a pretty big restriction. You've got to take a hit from it, but I really like this. I really like Reciprocate. Single Reprisal. 1 white to destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, which is like obviously all the big dragons in the other deck, which is quite nice. Mighty Leap to give +2/+2 in flying turn to help you block all those big flying dragons. Sigil Blessing to give 1 creature +3/+3 and all the other creatures +1/+1. This is actually a really nice buff, I think, to make 1 creature super strong and then buff up the rest of the board. I think it's really nice. Edge of Autumn. This was the card I was talking about with Knight the Red Crow, like the one card that lets you sacrifice a land and get like maybe a little bit of synergy out of that. So 1 green. If you control 4 or fewer lands, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library, and it has cycling to sacrifice a land. So yeah, it's fine. If you haven't got enough lands, it gets you 1. If you've got too many lands, you sacrifice and draw a card. It's fine. Single Heroes Reunion, just to gain 7 life, which is actually quite a chunky bit of life actually, and does help set the dragon deck back a little bit. It's easy, I think, to disparage life gain spells, but like when it's a more casual, like constructed product like this, and you got the other deck that's obviously trying to do as much damage as possible, 7 life might buy sort of like 1 or 2 turns to kind of like stay in the game. So yeah, I've got I recently have a new appreciation for life gain spells after just playing a few sealed games, and my friend just winning the game because he managed to like just gain some life and just hang in there. So yeah. And then a Oblivion Ring here with a weird new artwork. But yeah, 2 and a white, exile something until Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield. So yeah, it's all right. And then the final round in the deck is Lockstone Warhammer. So 3 mana equipment gives +3/+0 and trample and lifelink to the equipped creature. It has, I think this is it's had like certain new art throughout the years. I think this is the first time it had new art. I don't like this art for it at all. I much prefer the old angry elephant man holding up the hammer. This is I'm not keen on this, but it's still a super good card, super good equipment. Single Spider Silk Armor, 2 and a green, creature you control get +0/+1, have reach. Obviously this to help out again against all the flying dragons. I'd argue maybe it's a bit surplus requirements. You've got quite a few flying knights. You've got some buff spells that give flying. So yeah, this maybe is a little unnecessary. I used to love this card like when I was younger. This, if I could get it into a deck, I would, even though it's obviously quite conditional and not that great. Single Griffin Guide, 2 and a white. Aura goes on a creature, gives it +2/+2 in flying, and then when it dies, you make a Griffin creature token, which is, I think, pretty solid for 3 mana. Alright, and then the lands, so we've got a Sedgery Step. Enters the battlefield tapped, and when it does, you can give a creature protection from the color of your choice to land turn. That's really nice. Obviously, with Knight the Reliquary means you can get this out instant speed and get protection instant speed, which I've said a million times before. It's a really strong trick to do. Treetop Village. You can animate it, and it becomes a 3/3 green ape creature with trample, which is alright. And then maybe it dies, and then that gives Knight the Reliquary like an extra boost, maybe. Yeah, sure. 2 Selesnya Sanctuaries, just to give you green and white, but you've got to like bounce lands, all that kind of thing. Right, and then this is the fetch land I was talking about, the grasslands. So not the usual Terramorphic Expanse. But so grasslands enter the battlefield tapped. You can tap and sacrifice to search your labor for a forest or plains. Doesn't have to be basic forest or plains, which is gives it a lot of potential, I think, in other construction environments. Put it onto the battlefield, not tapped, which is also really nice. And then shuffle your library. So yeah, 2 of those, which I think is quite nice. And then 6 forests and 12 plains. And small trivia about the basic land art that was used in this product. It's not from any kind of previous main sets, because when I was looking at the images on Scryfall, I was like, oh man, this like forest art is really, really nice. I don't remember what set this could have come from, and it's actually from like a small like promo run of lands, I think, where it's all based on actual like real life locations like around Europe or something. It's something like that. It's really cool little bit of trivia if you like look into it. The artwork for the lands in this set. Anyway, yeah, so that was the deck contents. Obviously, I had some problems there with some of the contents in here, like the White Knight. I think is immediately that's a bad pick. Some knights I would have liked to have seen in here. Benelish Knight is a card I'm very fond of, and I think this would have been a really nice inclusion. It's 2 and white for a 2/2 with flash and first strike, so it's essentially like a combat trick. Tivadar of Thorn I think would actually been perfect in here. So he's 1 and double white for a 2/2 with first strike and pro red. Pro red actually maybe makes him a little bit problematic. And when he comes into play, you destroy a goblin. The dragon deck, despite being a dragon deck, also has has a lot of goblins in it as well. So this actually would have been, I think, quite a nice inclusion, maybe. Although I do, the pro red maybe would have made him like a little tricky for the other deck to deal with, but that's something that can be handled by just having like more colorless cards and stuff. I don't know. And then Waylay, this I think would have been nice to get, an update like in a new frame and like with updated wording as well. So Waylay is kind of infamous because of the way it was played in a way that was not meant to be intended. So Waylay, for 2 and a white, makes 3 2/2 night tokens, and they get removed and they get exiled at end of turn. But if you play it during the end step, then they last until like your next turn as well. It's essentially meant to be like you play it during combat and you just make 3 2/2 blockers. But there was a way that you could play it because of the way it was worded. You would have them. You would cast it in the end step essentially, and then you'd have them around for your next turn. And they can attack, and obviously getting 3 2/2 tokens for only 3 mana is pretty strong. So it has got updated wording now where I can't remember how it is, but like it's worded now so they always like no matter when you play it during the end step, they do absolutely go away at the end of turn. But yeah, that would have been nice to get that maybe with new art as well. The other thing as well, like I said, this being white green was kind of a weird choice for knights because normally associate knights with black or red as well. It would have been interesting maybe if this had been white black instead, or even maybe like in Abzan colors like white black green, because there's obviously like some good choices for knights in black. Dakmor Lancer is a possible here, 4 and double black. It's a 3/3 and it's just a straight up kill spell when it comes into play. Knight of Dusk, 1 and double black for a 2/2. You destroy a creature that's blocking it for double black, and Hakon, Stromgard Scourge. So 1 and double black for a 3/3. You can play him from your graveyard, but not anywhere else. If he's in play, you can play night cards from your graveyard, and when Hakon is put into a graveyard and play, you lose 2 life. So again, I guess the problem is like Hakon is super cool, but again, I guess like the problem here would have been sort of similar to Knight of the Reliquary in that like he's quite a technical card. Like you've got to find a way of getting into your graveyard, and that would have, for one card, you would have like had to like do a whole bunch of things in the deck to make it work. Like maybe have like extra like as an additional cost to cast a spell, like discard effects, stuff like that. So maybe maybe not Hakon, but like there's definitely other like good knights in black that I think could have maybe been in here if it was done in alternate colors maybe. So I'd love to know what you think about this deck. I'm very aware I sort of talked for a bit longer than I usually do on this deck, just because, well, I had a lot to say, as you heard. So I'd love to know what you think about this deck. As I say, you got any thoughts on like Knight the Reliquary, all those kind of cards that I talked about? Definitely stick a comment down below. But yeah, if you do, do you think white green was the best color combination? Do you think it would have been better as like white black or white red, or even maybe even triple color? Like, stick a comment down below. Always interested to hear what people think about these decks. But I'll be back next time. We're going to look at the dragon deck and see how it stacks up against the knights. So I hope you join me for that. But until then, thanks for watching and listening, and have a great day.